buddy? Can you hear me?
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yes. How you doing?
I'm doing well.
Okay. Definitely, it's a privilege to be able to speak with you and come from your studio, I see.
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
Question, what is the correct pronunciation of your name?
So I know the double N, it's Namdi.
Namdi. Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
My parents are
Yes.
Nigerian. So even though I was born here, yeah, Nigerian, so it's a Nigerian name.
Okay. Namdi.
Yes.
Yes, man. This is great. Thank you so much. I'm looking
Yeah,
forward to this.
yeah, definitely. Now we've got an international audience. I'm here in the UK. We've got people from Nigeria, America, UK, around the world who listen in. So I always stop my interview by asking my guests where you're sort of born and raised, so we can get a sort of a geography of your life.
Okay. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
So where were you born and raised?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
New York City, in Brooklyn, New York.
Okay.
Brooklyn, New York. Yes.
Okay. Now,
Yes.
for those of us who are familiar with American culture, we hear Brooklyn and we think of Biggie, and they seem to have amplified the city of Brooklyn. But what's it like? What was it like growing up in Brooklyn?
I mean, I grew up in the days where there were kids playing outside, stick ball, basketball hoops, block parties. It was just an amazing time, growing up in Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brooklyn, actually where Biggie Smalls was born and living. And Jay-Z and
Oh,
Big Daddy Kane and all of these guys. So I grew up right in the heart of Bedford Stuyvesant. So for me, my childhood was a lot of fun. Back in those days, the kids went outside and played stickball and baseball. And so when I wasn't playing stickball or any sports, I was always playing instruments inside the house. My brothers were DJs, so I would mess around with their turntables and listen to their albums and records, and that's how I fell in love with music.
okay. And then what was your family? How many was it? How many? What was the size of your family?
7 boys, seven
Seven.
brothers, 7 brothers and one sister.
Wow.
Yes.
My goodness. I mean, that
Yeah.
sounds like how did your parents cope with having 7 kids?
Well, I came up in a one parent home, just my
Oh,
mother, who did an amazing job raising 7 boys and one girl by herself. You know, it was something to see the strength of a woman. But it was fun because it was all majority of boys and a lot of wrestling and boxing and playing sports together and arguing, all the things that boys do. So it was an amazing, warm, loving household my entire life.
so out of the eight, where are you, in the middle, the oldest, the youngest?
I'm
Or?
I'm next to the youngest.
Okay, okay, okay. So you are the Randy Jackson of the family, right? So,
I'm the Randy Jackson. I'm the Randy Jackson. Yes.
okay, okay. Wow, but then it. So was did you have was your mom have it was your dad the children of all the father of all eight of you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And but he left and so just left your mom?
Yeah, whole story behind that. Yeah. That's for the book.
Okay, okay, that's fine. But how did that affect you though? Just I mean, how old were you when he left? And just
Um, Probably 7, 8. I don't know. But for me, having older brothers who were like brothers and father figures, I didn't miss it, to be honest with you, because I had uh amazing brothers, older brothers who were just great guys, hardworking brothers, loving brothers, caring brothers. So I never felt absent of an example. You know what I'm saying? Or elderly or father figure, because my brothers were always all things to me.
Your oldest brother, what's what's the age gap? So when you were 7, how old was he? The
I
oldest.
have I don't know. I don't know how my brothers are.
Oh goodness.
Yeah, there's so many of them I lose count.
Okay. 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 So I'm the eldest, so I have no idea what it's like being the
Yeah.
youngest and thinking if you've had
Yeah,
8 people ahead of
exactly.
you, what's the okay.
Exactly.
Okay. So getting into the music then, did I mean how you mentioned about the play turntables and listen to records, the actual instruments itself, did you ever get to touch those and
Yes, actually, my oldest brother, Thomas, we call him Sonny, he always had turntables and mixers in the house. So I would just mess around with his equipment while he was at work. I would sneak into his room
okay.
and mess around with his gear, and I would get in trouble for it later. But other than outside of that, we were a strong spiritual family. Grew up in the church. Back in those days, I mean, we went to church all the time. For me, as a young kid, it almost felt like we were in church 7 days a week. So that's when I learned how to play the drums and fell in love with playing the drums, because in my day, say if you went to church in the morning, you didn't get home till late at night, because there was a morning service, then it
Oh,
was an afternoon service, and then there was an evening service, right? So in between those services, I would mess around with the drums, and my mother saw that I had some interest in drums, and she invested and brought me a drum set. And that's really how things started for me as a musician.
okay. So it's when you say drum set, this isn't like the machine, it's the actual set of drums.
Actually, a set of drums.
Okay.
Actually, a set of drums. That was the first instrument that I learned to play, and then I started playing keyboards and organ and things like that. So, but the drums initially was my first instrument.
Now, when you think of drums, you think of noise and you think of how, unless you had a garage at the back and you play your drums, where were you playing your
Oh,
drums?
it was loud. It was definitely loud in the house.
And the neighbors didn't seem to bother when this your kids playing.
Nobody bothered. They didn't care. I was just a kid playing the drums. They were okay with it.
Wow. So did you play not just in church, but did you play with the band, or what was your sort of schooling?
As I got older, I played with some kids in the neighborhood. You know, we would call ourselves having a band. But and like I said earlier, Namdi, in those days, there were a lot of what we call block parties, where they would block off the streets and they would have food on the streets and all type of activities for the kids. But there were always live bands
Wow.
that would just come outside of their house and their front doors, and they would just play full bands. And that's when I was really captivated and I was mesmerized by the music. And I would sit there for hours and hours and hours just watching these bands play. And that's what started to form my love and desire to really, really want to be a musician.
Wow. Now, and those days had when you were young, had hip hop taken off, or was it what was the music that you were inspired by as a kid?
I was I was just inspired by all music, and especially gospel music, like the
Ah,
Hawkins family, listening to the Hawkins family on the radio, and then going to church. You know, we had amazing choirs and music departments, and the I grew up in a church where there was a phenomenal musician in every church. So that's what sparked me and wanted and made me want to be able to learn even more and go deeper in the craft. But that's really what started to steer me.
it seems as if that in the sort of the 80s, the church was the breathing ground for a lot of our producers and singers of the 90s. Um, but then what happens in the 70s and 60s, I don't know if they still were learning in church or something different, but it just seems as if majority of our 90s of all would go back to church singing, playing, and getting all that stuff from the church. What was it about sort of the environment of the church when it came to playing music that you think helped you hone your craft as a musician and a producer?
Being in the environment, choir rehearsals. My mother was a singer.
Okay.
She was one of the lead singers at our church. But my grandmother was a musician. My grandmother was an organist in Columbia, South Carolina, where I would spend a majority of my summers in South Carolina with my grandmother, watching her teach the choir, watching her teach piano and singers at the senior citizens centers. I just had to sit there for hours upon hours and watch that because there was nothing else to do. So all of that played a part in shaping what would later on become something that I would learn to love.
Yeah. Hey guys, thanks for watching. Thanks for being part of the Halftime Chat community. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. But most importantly, why don't you consider being a member? That's a way of supporting the channel, but also getting a lot of videos ahead of time, a lot of behind the scenes stuff, and some exclusive content that doesn't get shared. But anyway, thanks for watching and thanks for being part of Halftime Chat.